This is absolutely wild as Shams has just dropped another KD update and why the Rockets are back in contention of getting Kevin Durant. We are going to break down those new reports right here on Rockets Digest. Hello, everybody. I am your host, Donovan Ricondo. We appreciate you joining us here at Rockets Digest, where we break down the latest news, rumors, and updates regarding your H-Town team. And we're going to get straight into what we're talking about today because it is very, very exciting for Rockets fans right now. As you have heard, Kevin Durant is on the market. Everybody is talking about a potential trade that Shams has reported could happen in the next few days. That was 2 days ago. And so now we are in that zone of when a trade can possibly happen. Now, there has been a lot of reports and a lot of conflicting reports for that matter that have said, what teams are in, what teams are out in terms of actually receiving Kevin Durant. And so when I last talked to you guys, right, it was about the San Antonio Spurs not being one of the teams that would be in contention, right, for Kevin Durant, them not receiving him, and that the Rockets were kind of slipping in those rankings. Jace also did a video about the Minnesota Timberwolves probably being the favorites to acquire Kevin Durant, but a new report by Shams that just broke last night. He said this: the Miami Heat, San Antonio Spurs, and Houston Rockets are 15-time All-Star Kevin Durant's preferred trade destinations out of Phoenix, sources tell ESPN. Those across the NBA have been made aware in recent days that those are the three teams that Durant would commit to long term. So, this is great news for the Houston Rockets front office because Kevin Durant has put out on record from the most reliable source in the NBA that he is willing to not only sign with the Rockets but do so long term, which is very, very important when it comes to trading and seeing if KD is actually worth it. Because was that trade just going to be for the year that Kevin Durant's contract is for, or is that going to be for a longer period of time? Now, there's still many debates, right? Is that longer period of time still worth it? He's 36 years old. He is on the tail end of his career. Is that worth it? But at the very least, right, he is interested in the Houston Rockets. Now, you see the other teams in there. The San Antonio Spurs, who, as of 2 days ago, were the favorite to land KD. As of yesterday, was a team that was said to not even be in contention for KD for not being as aggressive. But now, here they are back as one of the favorites to land KD. KD wants to go there. KD has a preferred trade destination to go to San Antonio. And not only San Antonio, but also the Miami Heat. Miami has been kind of a dark horse in these conversations. Not a lot of people talking about them. They do have, they went to the play-in last season with Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. And so there is an interesting spot to land at for KD being there in Miami. Now, one of the teams that are not on here that we said were kind of the favorites as of yesterday are the Minnesota Timberwolves. So what does that situation look like with Minnesota? Well, according to Ari, who has been on fire with keeping up these updates with the KD situation, has been proven to be very, very accurate, had this to tweet out just yesterday. While the Timberwolves have been the most aggressive team in exploring a Kevin Durant trade, I'm told Durant himself remains unconvinced about a fit in Minnesota, both on and off the court. And that to me is very, very telling about two things, right? The first thing is Kevin Durant. He is more aware of things than we probably give him credit for. As on the outside looking in, we look at these things and on court and off court fit. This is something that he is also keeping in mind in terms of where he wants to play next season. So although Minnesota is very, very aggressive in these trade talks, and as they should, right, to get a guy like Kevin Durant, pair him up with Anthony Edwards, is very, very telling in terms of where they are at. And to me, doesn't necessarily rule out Minnesota as a trade destination for KD. But at the same time, when we see that KD is not putting the Minnesota Timberwolves in his top three in his preferred trade destinations is very, very telling to what he thinks about his situation over there. In terms of on the court, I kind of sprinkled this in yesterday. I just don't think him going to Minnesota would be all that beneficial. I feel like that would just make them a very top-heavy team and not a lot of the depth that they have been accustomed to the past 2 years, because they have expiring contracts with Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and of course Julius Randle. And so there is a lot of questions to be had with the Timberwolves, and acquiring KD would be the first domino to fall in terms of what they would do. But nevertheless, KD has the Houston Rockets as one of his preferred trade destinations. And so that just makes this all the more real. Now, the Houston Rockets just signed Steven Adams to a $39 million contract, getting paid $13 million per year. And so you can debate whether or not that money is worth it. If you ask me, I do. We were looking at an $8 to $12 million contract with 13. Hey, he really proved himself to be that guy in the playoffs. So I am not too mad about that. By no means necessary. But to get KD right, to get and acquire a guy who has been, fairly solid for the past 2 years, he's remained healthy pretty much. 26 points per game, 6 rebounds, 4.2 assists, shooting 52% from the field, 43% from three. And so you have to wonder, right? All of these things seem to be lining up for the Houston Rockets to make a trade. Now, we know that the Houston Rockets have been in talks with KD and his team, and have reached out to Phoenix in terms of what they can possibly get. And one of the things we've stressed here on this channel is the price right? If the price is right, go for it. We don't want to give up too much of what we have, because that trade would look like in sending away a guy like Jabari Smith for sure. You look at guys like Cam Whitmore, Reed Shepherd, that 10th overall pick, of course, is going to be gone, going straight back to Phoenix, who it originally belonged to. And then you start looking at a guy like Jalen Green, who many people have a lot of opinions about in terms of what we should do with him this offseason. He had a very lackluster playoff performance, but at the same time, he has a huge, huge amount of potential and is not on the most expensive contract in terms of guys that you look at and tell yourself, oh, this guy could be the guy for the team. He's not making as much money as, say, like a Devin Booker, who we were also interested at some point this offseason. So you would be paying a lot less for Jalen Green, but he might be involved in these conversations. And so it's very interesting to see what the Houston Rockets will do to him and his contract. Now, a couple of things to note about KD. KD, if you didn't know, is on an expiring $54.7 million deal for the 2025-2026 season. And the Suns have made clear to the 6 to 8 seriously interested teams that they will make the best deal for the franchise, even if it means trading Durant to a team outside his preferred list, sources said. And that could affect the Houston Rockets' ability to acquire KD. As I mentioned before, there could just be a team that swoops in, says, hey, here's everything we'll offer you. I know KD isn't necessarily interested in coming here, but if you want to make the best deal for you, the Phoenix Suns, this is what we have to offer, and this is why we think this is the best deal. Shams kind of compared it to 2018, the 2018 offseason when Kawhi and the Spurs were, trying to negotiate a trade. Kawhi wanting to go to LA. The Spurs weren't able to really make that trade and ended up trading him to Toronto. And as many of you know, that did lead to a championship for Toronto. So kind of a crazy trade to make on that report. But yes, there could be a team that just swoops in and makes an all-out offer in hopes that offer would eventually lead to them going and winning a championship the following season. Now, what team that would be remains to be uncertain. I can't think of a lot of teams that are simply a KD away from winning an NBA championship. Some might argue that's the Houston Rockets. I don't know. You tell me. Are we a KD away from winning an NBA championship? It's a very hard thing to decide because, again, although he is a great player, he is 36 years old. That's on the tail end of your career, but he's still averaging great numbers, 26 points per game. It's quite insane if you ask me. And so one more thing to note about Kevin Durant. Once he is traded, though, Durant will be eligible to sign a 2-year contract extension July 6th, worth as much as $122 million. If he were to wait 6 months after the trade, he could sign a 2-year extension worth up to $124 million. And this is a very important thing to note if you are a Houston Rockets fan. As you know, he's willing to do a long-term contract with those three teams, the Heat, the Spurs, the Rockets. So with the Rockets, he can sign a 2-year extension, keeping him for the next 2 seasons. And that it will be worth either $122 million if he does it by July 6th, or if he waits 6 months, that could be $124 million. So over the course of 2 years, you're looking at around 60 to 60 or 62, $61 million that you are dedicating to Kevin Durant. And when you put it in that perspective, when you put it in a financial perspective, you have to ask yourself, is KD, as great as a player as he is it worth paying him $60 million a year to keep him on this team? And will that money go directly to an NBA championship? And that's where I personally am unsure whether or not that would be worth it, right? The numbers, that's a hefty part of your salary cap. That's over like 2 times as much as you would be paying Jalen Green. So Jalen Green to me would probably be the one that would be in this trade package. But at the same time, is that worth it? Is that the right move to make financially and also from a basketball perspective? Because if you would have a package, right, that would include the 10th pick, Jalen Green for contract purposes, Jabari Smith Jr., and let's say a few other first-round picks. Let's just put it like that. You're looking at a starting lineup that has Fred VanVleet, if you decide to resign him. Then you have KD. Then you have Alperen Şengün, Amin Thompson, and then you can probably put a guy like Tari Eason in that lineup as well instead of Jalen Green, or maybe even maybe you can give Cam Whitmore some minutes. Maybe you're banking on Cam Whitmore. And so it's a lot to decide on what the Rockets will decide to do in terms of who they want to give up, and do they believe that they have the guys that are currently on the bench, like Cam Whitmore, Reed Sheppard, that can step in and make that an impact that they weren't able to make last year. And so when I look at that lineup, it's hard for me to tell everybody so decidedly, right, that that's a better lineup for not only next season, but for the next 2 seasons, the next 3 seasons, right? You have to be looking out for the future of the Houston Rockets. And so if you ask me, it's a very, very, very risky move to make if you're the Rockets front office. Although these are very positive updates in terms of a KD pursuit for the Houston Rockets, you have to start to wonder, is it worth giving up what we have now and to pay $60 million a year to Kevin Durant to make a championship happen? I want you guys to tell me in the comment section, because I have seen a lot of more negative comments in terms of not wanting KD, right? Not believing that he is worth all that money and worth the time to make that trade. But as these updates keep rolling in, and I'm sure there'll be another update very, very soon, the Rockets are currently one of those teams that are most likely to make a deal. And if you ask me, is the team that has the assets to make that deal, the best assets to make that deal? So you tell me in the comments, what do you think of a possible KD coming to Houston and being on this team for the next 2 seasons if he decides to sign that long-term extension? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you've made it to the end of the video, that tells me you are a true Rockets fan, and that if you want to stay up to date and in the loop with all your Rockets content throughout the offseason, you're going to want to hit that subscribe button below. We're covering it all, me and Jace. We are growing here, and we just love for you guys to join us. I have been Donovan Ricondo, your host for Rockets Digest. We'll see you next time. Adios.